Well, hi there, everybody. How you doing today? We have some jokes for you. What's the first joke, friend?
Ringing in my ears.
Oh, Doc, I have a ringing in my ears. And the doctor said, don't answer it.
Attendance record.
Son, with your attendance record, you will never make President of the United States. However, you might make Congress.
BA.
Folks, you know what BA stands for? Bachelor of Arts. You know what BS stands for? And MBA stands for Master of Business Administration, or more bad advice. And PhD, what's that stand for? Piled higher and deeper. We're talking to you about the years 1966 and 1967 and 1968 and 1969 and 1970. There was still that search for God, search for that peace that passes understanding. And Glendora made that connection with the Asbury, Delaware Methodist Church in teaching those children in the after school. It was all volunteer. It was all started with Nancy Crosby and myself. It was our idea. There was a need there. And the funny things that the kids did. One time, I couldn't be there one noon, and Nancy was there, and Nancy had been sent out by the minister to buy some supplies, and she came back to the church later than she thought. And a little boy came into the church for the noon games, the noon activities, and there was nobody there, and the door was locked. And so when Nancy came in, the first thing we usually did was to start with a prayer. And the little boy says, thank you, God, for the moon. Thank you, God, for the sun. Thank you, God, for the sky. And thank you, God, for Miss Nancy, who was late. And Jimmy had a clock, a little make-believe clock, and it had hands on it. And he would move these hands, and I don't know what he was doing, but he was saying, 12 o'clock, 12:30, 1 o'clock, 1:30, 2 o'clock, all the way up to 4 o'clock, 4:30 o'clock, and then I said, Jimmy, it's time to close the church school. And here he's going through all these numbers on the clock, and then he says to me, what time is it? And we had always gave them something to eat. And Jimmy says, Miss Glendora, what do I do with my crumbs? And I said, gee, Jimmy, it would be nice if you could feed them to the ants. Well, where do you find ants in downtown Buffalo that's all concrete? No lawns. But there was between two lots in the back of the church. And this was a huge, beautiful church with two great big towers, two great big spirals. And so we found a place between two lots where there was some soil. There was some ground. And we went out there. And we put the crumbs on the ground. And I said, Jimmy, you made the ants very happy. And he said to me, I wish I could see the smiles on their faces. And Nancy's mother came to us with the church one day. And we asked her mother to do something. And she says, well, I can't do that because I have an engagement. And little Shirley says, is she going to get married? I found somebody that inspired me. That was Brother Lawrence. Did you ever hear of Brother Lawrence? He belonged to an order in France around 1700, sometime in there. And he was a very humble man. He was a cook in the kitchen, a scullion. But he knew how to get dinner for all of those monks and stay in the presence of God. And that's what you will hear over and over again about Brother Lawrence, the presence of God. He could always be in the presence of God. And that's something that I wanted. I wanted to be in the presence of God. Would you like to be in the presence of God? And at all times he was. And as humble a position as he had bishops come and see him. Bishops, Roman Catholic bishops. They wanted to be in the presence of God, and they wanted to know, how did he do it? Friend of mine, do you have any other prompts you can give me?
Summer Street?
Oh, we rented an apartment on Summer Street, and it was one of these big old Victorian houses, huge house. And we had the third floor. Listen to what was it. There was a study, and there was a back door and a fire escape down at the back door. And then there was a smaller bedroom, and then there was a larger bedroom, and then there was a foyer that was as large as a bedroom, and a huge living room as large as 3 living rooms with a turret and stained glass windows. Beautiful from the outside. And then there was a huge dining room and a huge kitchen. It was big as 3 times, I bet, as big as your kitchen. Well, it was grand, but it was a mess. And I set out to redecorate it. And I made the 1 bedroom black, yellow, and white. And I painted these great big squares. They look like checkerboards on the one wall, and the other wall was yellow. And then all the accessories were yellow. And then the other room I did in purple and white, 2 shades of violet. Oh, that looked nice. The dining room I left alone, and it had stained glass windows. And the kitchen was okay. In the living room, I fixed that up. There was a closet that had never been finished. The lattice was showing. And so I got wallboard and covered that up. And I put physics and motion equations on the wall. Very beautiful. These mathematical equations and they made a great decoration. And we had professors come for dinner. Our math professor came and our physics professor came. And of course they enjoyed that 3rd floor apartment. What else, friend?
Little girl?
What, dear?
Little girl? Little girl?
Oh, there was a little girl lived in the apartment across the driveway. And she was such an advanced little girl. She was only about 6. And I offered to entertain her and take her to the store. And it was the cutest thing how she said, "Things are so expensive in this store."
Bicycle?
I bought a bicycle. I thought it would be great if Nancy and I rode a bicycle to the church every day, to church school. And we went down Delaware Avenue. It was very wide and very highly traveled. A main street. Went by Mrs. Butler's house, who owned the Buffalo Evening News. And
helping animals?
Yes, helping animals all the time, rescuing kitty cats and doggies.
Dog bite?
What was that, dear?
Dog bite?
Oh, this one dog I was trying to help was a German Shepherd, folks. And I was trying to give him something to eat, or I was trying to pet him, and he grabbed my hand right here, the back of my hand, and that tooth went way down deep. And I said, Rex, please take your tooth out of my hand. Rex, take it out. I didn't know what he was going to eat the whole hand, but he did take it out. And I went home as quickly as I could, and I didn't call a doctor, and I didn't call people about rabies shot and that. I took it home, folks, and I soaked it in Epsom salts, for an hour or two, and soaked it again the same day, and the next day, and the next day, and it healed beautifully. That great big deep wound just healed beautifully. But it did leave quite a scar. But you know something? After 10 years or so, the scar went away. You can't see a scar there, can you? Friend over here, there's no scar, is there?
No.
Yep.
Okay, St. Joseph?
Across the street from this beautiful stone building where we live was a huge Roman Catholic cathedral. It was huge, with a huge lawn. It was a magnificent building. Guess what happened to that after 3 or 4 years, after we were there? They tore it down. You know why? They couldn't afford the upkeep. Can you imagine that?
Franklin newspaper?
Franklin was very successful as a reporter for the Buffalo Evening News. He had a byline every day, maybe 2 bylines, and he covered the most important stories. Did I tell you how he covered the Rock Hudson?
12 o'clock p.m., 75.2 degrees Fahrenheit.
Thank you, little temperature clock. How he covered Doris Day and Rock Hudson in the Pillow Talk. The city editor sent him down to New York City, to Manhattan, to cover that. And he had a picture taken with Lana Turner. So he was quite famous and very popular. And he would write these beautiful stories, as I told you, and the people were so relieved to have a reporter who had sensitivity and who was a good citizen and who was a good Christian write these stories that were kind and true and got out the information that they intended to get out to the public.
Physics and love?
Yes. During that period, 1966 to 1970, I wrote quite a few books. The meditation was terrific. The performance was not great, but the meditation was good. And one book was Be Perfect. And I published it on plastic because I wanted to get rid of using paper, because paper costs the lives of trees. And not only did I love animals, but I loved all plants. And so I tried to find a way to get around using paper and plant products that weren't, well, it's all right to eat a plant product named a peach, because the seed, you don't destroy the plant. You don't destroy the plant because there's a seed there. Well, I published this book, and you will see it on the video, and it was all in plastic. The pages were plastic, and the cover was plastic. I had to find a printer who would do that. And another book I published on plastic was The Answer to Everything. And then the last series I wrote was, I think it was 3 volumes, maybe 4, called Physics and Love. And I'll tell you about that later.
Veganism.
Yeah, veganism. I abandoned vegetarianism and went strictly veganism. No animal products, no honey, because the bees work too hard to make their honey, and it's a shame to steal it from them. No cheese, no milk, because we steal it from the mother cow and from the baby cow, and that's not a right thing to do, and give the baby inferior food to eat. No leather in the shoes and things like that. Don't wear animals and don't eat animals.
2 cars?
We had 2 cars, a 1950 Dodge that I told you about and the 1956 Lincoln.
Okay, TV news?
TV news were taking over television. They canceled one live program after another. And it was just taking over television. It's all that seemed to be on television was news. And it was always bad news. It was very seldom was it good news.
Warren Buffett?
Now, the Buffalo Evening News was a prestigious newspaper, very well received all over the country, and it had a huge circulation. It was the second largest city outside of New York, and it was almost as big as some of the New York newspapers. There was the New York Post and the New York Times. And it was owned by the Butler family. Her husband ran it, and her husband was the son of the founder. And it was a high-class newspaper, too. You know, very high class and very careful and very clean. And then Mrs. Butler died. Well, you know how kids are. Rich kids, they don't want the property. They want the money. They want the cash. So all of her children opted to sell the Buffalo Evening News. Guess who bought it? Warren Buffett. Well, Warren Buffett came to Buffalo to see the Buffalo News, Evening News, and see how it was run, and see how he could ruin it. And that he did, and they had a party for him. And I went to that party, and I saw Mr. Buffett. He was a very shy man. And I missed the opportunity to talk to him and make him feel comfortable at that party, because he was not comfortable. He was amidst strangers, and I could have gone over there and made him feel very relieved. But I didn't do that.
Peale?
Norman Vincent Peale had a brother who was the minister of the Richmond Avenue Methodist Church in Buffalo. And we went to that church. And we left our name, or people met us, or something. And this Mr. Peale, not Dr. Peale, came to our house and pleaded with us to join that church. I didn't. I wished I had, but I didn't. The least I could have done was to gratify him by joining that church. Franklin would have gone along with it. And he was a very likable person. He did not have the charisma of Norman Vincent Peale, but then who does? Norman Vincent Peale I later saw in White Plains. I don't want to get ahead of the story. Let me tell you that when we do that year about Norman Vincent Peale.
Delavan?
We moved from the place on Summer Street because the owner found out that he could rent that huge apartment to students going to the State University of New York at Buffalo, and he could get 3 times the rent because he had 3 times the number of people in that apartment. So we went to Delavan Avenue, and that was a very nice apartment, very, very nice apartment. And let's see what happened there. Well, I thought maybe I could find God if I studied the universe. And what discipline studied the universe? Physics. So I got the shocking idea to study physics. I had also had an inferiority about my science education. My classical education was superb. It was great. But physics and math, I really had great deficiencies. So I decided it was time to make up those deficiencies, and I enrolled at the State University of New York at Buffalo and took elementary physics, freshman physics, and I took calculus. And it was very, very interesting. And I began to see that physics described another force, love. And I began to write equations for love. And that love was just like an electromagnetic force. It acted the same way, and it could be calculated the same way. And that fascinated me. And that's when I started writing the book, Physics and Love. That was 3 volumes. And it transcribed the physics basic formulas like Newton's first law, second law, and third law. And it could all be applied to love. And that fascinated me. And that's how that book came about.
My mother?
My mother was with me. My mother would come and visit me from Maine, although her residence was still around Augusta, Maine, with my brother Gordon and my brother Ralph. And let's see, could you pause a minute, friend?
Yes.
Let's see. My darling Franklin sang in the choir. He had the most beautiful tenor voice, and he could sing so well. And he sang a solo in church, and it was beautiful. And guess what the solo was? St. Francis of Assisi. Let there be love. And my mother and doctor and one of the PhDs from Buffalo, from the university, we took him out to dinner at the top of the town, which was way up on top of the Marine building. And there was a dining room there. And they had these little loaves of bread that they would bake. And each person got a loaf of bread, and it was in the container that it was baked in. Well, my mother loved that bread. It was like her homemade bread. And she ate the little tiny loaf, and then she ate my loaf. And then when her dinner came, she couldn't eat a thing.
Franklin's book.
And now Franklin, one of the professors at the university knew a man who was a book publisher. And they got interested in Franklin publishing some of his newspaper writings and some of his poems. Remember I told you he wrote these beautiful poems that were in the newspaper every week? And so they decided to publish a book of Franklin, and he decided to call it something of love. He always liked to write about little people doing big things. So this is how they arranged the book. They had a prose story of one of his newspaper articles, and then they had a poem, and then a prose story, and then a poem, and that was the whole book. We'll show you the book and read you one of our favorite poems from it.
Niagara Falls.
The big attraction in Buffalo, of course, is Niagara Falls. You know, it's right across, just up the road a little ways, the American side of the Niagara Falls.